Welcome to the Cult Bar. Hello, Renee. How are you?
Good. How are you?
Yeah. So, as per our custom, let us start with what we are drinking. Give us what your beverage is this evening, please.
I am flexing my muscles as a cocktail expert after doing the show for 2 years, and I created a cocktail.
Oh boy, look at the glass. That's lovely.
Yeah, well, it's got little bees on it. You can't tell, but anyway,
Yeah.
this is called "The Higher the Hair, the Closer to Heaven." For obvious reasons, if you guys have seen the cover of the documentary, you don't even need to see the documentary. And so what I took from it was that it should be Southern and it should be high. So it is bourbon, which is the liquor I most associate with the South. Fuck mint juleps. Tart cherry, because that's delicious with bourbon. And then a little bit of THC sparkling water. This is a pineapple coconut. It's just like a little floater. You could put a THC soda in it if that is legal and available to you. But whatever happens by mixing THC and liquor is your responsibility and not mine.
Well, yeah, you want to make sure that you don't cross the streams, maybe. So how?
And it tastes really good.
Nice.
I wish I had lemon lime. I think lemon lime would be slightly better than coconut pineapple, but it's really good.
Well, that sounds delicioso. So I went with something called a broken plane, which another obvious reason, since that's a big part of this whole thing. So this is the drink here. I mixed it and put it in my little barrel and flow glass.
That is a big drink.
Yeah. So they call it for 3.5 ounces, basically 3.5 ounces of everything. I just had enough to make 3 ounces of everything. So that's 3 ounces of 3 ounces of freshly squeezed lemon juice. I had Audible. I only had one lemon, so I had 1 lemon and 2 limes. So citrus adjacent. 3 ounces of Amaro, 3 ounces of gin, and then 3 ounces of elderberry flower liqueur.
That's a lot.
Yes.
Hope you make it to the end of the episode.
Me too. And I might not drink all this. So, but cheers to that. Ooh, with the Amaro and the citrus, that's super delicious. Wow.
It does sound good.
Like usually the drinks I have in here are like, here's blue curacao and shit I would never drink. So
that's why I made my own this time. Yeah. I was looking and everything was a variation on like pineapple juice and cranberry juice and grenadine. And I'm like, I've had that cocktail like 40 times on this show. Like,
yeah. So there was one that was called Plane Crash. I didn't have the ingredients for that, and I didn't feel like buying 3 different bottles of booze, so I just went with this because I had everything. The only thing I didn't have was the elderflower liqueur, so I picked that up. But that's a good liqueur to have on hand because it's really good. So we got a lot to talk about with the show, but before we do that, why don't we have a little news?
So this piece comes to us from, I already forgot the name and lost my notes. Hold on. Sorry.
The Guru magazine.
Right. But it comes to us from B. Schofield, who no longer has the bio. Oh, here it is. A prominent cult reporter who exposed Love Has Won. So, yeah, her work has been cited by New York Times, Rolling Stone, People Magazine, Netflix, and more. So she knows what she's talking about. And this is part of the reason I think that she's caught. I'm saying she. I don't actually know that. Yes, it says she. Sorry. She probably only knows about this because she's so plugged in. But the weirdest thing is that these 2 young men who have founded this cult that she's talking about now, they infiltrated cults and made documentaries to expose them, and now apparently are using the knowledge they won from infiltrating cults to run one of their own. And we've got all the hits here. There is aliens and UFOs. There's giant rabbits, which I think was Doug's favorite part.
That was.
There is miracles being performed. Quote, I saw him resurrect my wife from the dead, a follower of Hashem says in a video.
Wow.
Yeah, the group has over 24 videos posted attesting to his ability to perform miracles. One claims he healed their terminal cancer, that he made the moon disappear, that he turned leaves into living animals, that angels have flown across the sky to testify for him. He is arranged marriages in the group because of course he has. He has coerced women into sex because of course he has. He I'm saying he, there's two guys, but Hashem is the one that is focused on a lot in this. He believes the end of the world is coming. He has coerced people into some really intensely, this part's maybe the weird part. He's coerced people into some intensely serious self-harm. So he, Abdullah told me to put my arm in a cutting machine. He told another member to jump from a 3rd-story building, someone else to jump into a fire. Yasir told me Hashem made him go to a strip club and drink alcohol and filmed him. Both things were challenging for him given his traditional Muslim upbringing. Hashem then told him to go to a prostitute, which he refused. So, because part of this is that they're basically like, the basic belief system here is that they're like a more progressive form of Islam. So LGBTQIA people are allowed, women don't have to wear head coverings, but then there's all of the abuse and coercion. So it's interesting. I suggest you check the article out. It is intense. And like I said, it's playing all the cult leader hits. It seems like they really took notes, which is a weird thing, but we do find that out over and over again when we do the show. Jim Jones hung out with MJ Devine, and there's examples of this everywhere. It's very weird. But yeah, I don't know. Hopefully this doesn't end badly, but it sounds like it's already in the process of ending badly.
Yeah. Also, he is trying to do his best Jared Leto impression there. So
yeah,
it is his own little cult stuff going on. But
sorry, I didn't say the name of the cult, which is, I keep his doomsday stuff is very intense.
Yeah, Amane, Religion of Peace and Light.
Yes. So like I say, you should look it up. It is insane. This is on gurumag.com, which I'm going to have to do a lot more reading on this magazine because it sounds like it's kind of up our alley.
Yeah.
He's going to take all your money and arrange your marriages and abuse you.
And sleep with all the women too, because that's how it always works. But yes.
That's already happening. Yeah, that's already happening. So weird stuff.
Yeah, well, as per the usual with the things we cover on this show.
We don't cover a lot of normal stuff, do we? What is becoming normal for us is getting increasingly weird to everyone else. So the way down, this is going to be a weird one to give trigger warnings on because they're all there.
Yeah.
So we have talk of suicide, teen suicide. We have talk of homophobia. We have extreme forced dieting and a lot of eating disordered eating. We have religious control. We have financial abuse. We have talk of child molestation. We have a pretty tragic plane crash. We have, as a result of that, we're going to be talking about children who were orphaned, child physical abuse, murder of a child. I think that might be it.
Yeah. So, and if we missed one, you know the drill. If it's something where it's just too much and you can't handle it mentally, we have no qualms of you just bowing out and taking care of your mental health. That's more important. So,
Yeah, we watch these so you don't have to, unless you really want to, and then you can hopefully watch both. Watch us and them. I don't know.
Yeah. Why not both? You know, is my little attempt at a meme. So the way down is basically this cult that was originally sort of before it became its own sort of religious cult. It was this lady Gwen Shamblin who did this thing called the Way Down Diet. I think that was actually the program, but it was like the Way, WEIGH down.
Right, because the only reason, to my knowledge, that the documentary is WAY is because she, spoiler alert, died in a plane crash, which is a little bit maybe in poor taste, but also she was a heinous
little on the nose, maybe. But she uses this thing. She takes a pretty interesting tact in that she really promotes that being thin equates to God loving you, as well as she goes into financial stuff. But like we've seen a lot of cult leaders like, hey, you need to be thin. You need to do. We've seen a lot of them do this, but I don't think we've ever covered one where the direct correlation of being thin equals godly. I don't think we've ever seen like that. Really?
Well, and it's interesting because she seems to like frame it in this way of like, if you are thin, then you have been making sacrifices for God. If you are fat, then you've been putting food above God. And there's a lot of talk about other things that you could put before God, but most of the talk is putting food before God, and I quote, worshiping the refrigerator as the false idol, which is fucking bonkers.
Yeah.
You commented. So the thing that was weird though, right, is that she's not the first person to come out with a God diet. They gave examples. There was the divine diet. There was
what would Jesus eat? What would Jesus eat? Just like I heard that and I just started laughing.
Like, I mean, probably Middle Eastern food.
Yeah, but Jill was sort of half listening. She's like, "What?" I said, "What would Jesus eat?" And she was like, "I missed that." Interesting note: her Gwen Shamblin's first book, "The Way Down," was something Jill's mom had in her house, and Jill remembered reading it in a certain time of her life that was a little bit dark. So so like she had that in her house, but her mom, like a lot of 90s moms, like it was slim fast and it was just all diet all the time. So
one of my favorite things, actually, and I'm probably going to reference, like we'll get this out of the way up front. Probably everything I say about health, weight loss culture, all of that is going to be like directly or indirectly sourced to the podcast Maintenance Phase, which is hosted by the author Aubrey Gordon, who's got a lot of fantastic books on this culture and how damaging it is, and Michael Hobbs, who's a great journalist. And she actually has she's what would be considered morbidly obese. Like she is in that range that everybody talks about is like, I just have to tell you how fat you are because it's going to kill you or whatever. It's horrible. I'm not saying you should, but that's the background here. And she actually has a collection of diet books because this sort of became like, she took it from this weird oppression of growing up in the 90s with all of this, I think a lot of millennial women, these weird messages about what it means to be thin and what fat is, because fat in the 90s and early 2000s was actually pretty thin. And she's turned it into this like lifelong study. And there's some really fucking wacky ones out there. And I think they did an episode on one that was like a God diet, but it wasn't one of the ones mentioned in this episode.
Yeah. I don't think I'll ever recover from what would Jesus eat. I don't think I'll ever recover from that. That was so freaking nuts.
I mean, tabbouleh, probably some hummus. Whatever.
Labna.
Lamb, probably.
All just dips. We're just mentioning dips.
Well, no, I said lamb. He probably would eat lamb, which is funny.
That's true. I thought, well, you were like hummus, and I said labna, and I'm like, okay, these are all dips, but yeah.
Middle East really has the fucking on dips. It's like Mexico and the Middle East. That's it. Like
Yeah. Well, so let's touch. I want to just make mention of where this is, because this is in a place called Brentwood, Tennessee, or in some towns around it. Also, I just want to.
Way.
What's that?
That it's also Brent, because like it's like this sort of vapid weirdness that I associate with Brentwood in California, but with
That's
God.
what I was thinking.
Yeah,
that's what I was thinking, and it's got the same kind of wealth, apparently.
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
Very wealthy people, predominantly, overwhelmingly, soul-crushingly white, as evidenced by some of the names in this. And these people, it's just like I hate to say it that way, but there's like Gwen and Delaney is another name that's mentioned, and I'm like, oh boy,
I should have taken notes.
I did take notes, and of course, my last 3 episode notes just evaporated in the air. So
I meant just on the names, like how.
Oh, I should have, yeah.
White, yeah. I did take notes.
Yeah. So, but there's this Ashlon is the name of Gwen's mansion estate, and it is what's the word? God damn it, plantation. It's a plantation.
Yes, but weirdly done, not in the plantation style. It looks like the college I went to, which was modeled after like Harvard and Yale.
Interesting. So but they mentioned it specifically as a plantation in the show. That's why I was like wanted to.
Oh yeah, I mean, fucking every rich white person in the South wants a plantation. Which let's fucking get real about how disgusting and weird that is. But what was weird because they were talking about it, and I'm like, yeah, of course it's a plantation. And then they show it, and I'm like, that looks like an East Coast college. What is happening?
Yeah. But we just want to set it that this is in an extremely affluent area. And that plays a role in this very heavily, to me.
I think they valued that property at $7 million in the episode.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, since she's no longer amongst the livings. But so I wanted to mention that because not only is there this diet culture piece, there's very much the prosperity gospel tied into it as well. So those are intertwined. Thinness and richness and the appearance of things. Just like, they talked a lot about how you always had to be happy. And if there was something bad, you just had to get over it, get past it. We got to be happy. And just like, there was no room for processing that stuff.
I mean, they talk about, there's a few different things that happen throughout the course of the timeline they're covering. Gwen Shamblin's daughter, who is a major figure in the church, lost her baby very young, and the former members interviewed were like, it was like nothing happened. They just didn't talk about it. We had the day that Gwen and her husband and
5 other people.
Yeah, I couldn't remember if it was 7 other people or 7 total. Thank you. Died in a terrible plane crash, orphaning multiple children. A wedding went on like nothing happened. Nobody spoke about it at all. There was unfortunately the murder of a child. And while that was going on, that wasn't really talked about. When Gwen and her husband died, her daughter didn't really acknowledge grief, although she does seem, that's the catch, right? Is that you're not allowed to acknowledge it, but then she's taken like so much time off and not really done anything despite being the heir apparent because, she lost her husband and her mom at the same time. And I bet she's pretty fucking sad. Like, let's be real.
Imagine so.
That she can't, nobody is allowed to know that she's sad. And I think that has a lot to do with her going, like, kind of basically being in hiding, really. They don't say it like that, but that's what it sounds like to me. And then you have her son, Gwen Shamblin's son, Michael, who has ups and downs with depression. And they talked about, like, straight up, like, they would just hide him away.
Yeah.
And he's an adult, but still, that's horrible. These, it's your parents. They're supposed to be there for you when you're depressed. Your church community is supposed to be there for you when you're depressed, when you're sad. And that was actually a little triggering for me because that is very much like how the church that I went to, you could not be sad. Funerals were not about grieving. Because I think there's this, this fine line, right? Like, I love a celebration of life, but you should be allowed to also be sad. and miss that person.
Mhm.
And a recurrent theme with like LDS funerals, you're not sad. You have to pretend to be happy because they're just onto this better place and you're going to get to see them again and it's all fine. So yeah, but like, you know, I miss people when they're away, like when they live somewhere else. So obviously when I'm missing when they're dead, like what is going on? So, but the other thing too that is it's not just that you can't be sad. But like if you acknowledge that you're sad, then you're acknowledging something bad happened. And if you acknowledge something bad happened, then you are not righteous. Because if a bad thing happens and it affects you, that's your fault.
Yeah, they position it like being selfish. Like
Yeah.
you're being selfish because God is giving you this gift and you need to not be sad, you know. You need to be repentant. Repent was mentioned a zillion times.
So much. Because when bad things happened, it had to be that God was punishing someone for something. And that was something that came up when Elizabeth, I keep wanting to say Shamblin. I'm sure she changed her name when she got married.
Hannah was she was Shamblin / Hannah. She kind of hyped.
There you go. That when her son died, when her baby died, sorry, that's another very white name. Henley was the name of the baby. That it wasn't acknowledged until it was pulling people in to ask them, like, what are you doing? What are your sins? What did you do to bring this judgment on our church? Because obviously it wasn't Elizabeth's fault and it wasn't Gwen's fault. So it had to be the church's fault.
Yeah.
And people actually talked about expecting it to be turned on them. They didn't have to wait for her to say it's your fault. They were like, what did we do?
Yeah. And but you see in cults as we talk, it's always the cult leader never accepts responsibility for anything. It's always somebody else's fault, something else, and that's just how it works for those because, they're narcissists and megalomaniacs and they can't accept that they did anything wrong. So, yeah.
And it's really depressing. And one of the things I think is really depressing about like just how this all started, right, is it's like if Gwen Shamblin just had a fucking therapist, like how much of this wouldn't have happened.
Well, it's also go ahead. Sorry.
Well, she grew up in a clean your plate household. And what I understand of like really strict households, clean your plate means clean your fucking plate. Like people, I've heard some horror stories. They didn't talk about this, but like, you eat every crumb of food or else like there's a punishment involved with not eating every crumb of food. And so to her, that almost certainly fucked up her eating habits, both mentally and physically, because we do know that the way that you eat when you're a child affects how your body metabolizes, processes food, whatever. And then she went to college and she gained 15 pounds, which to her was horrible. And it's like, well, that is normal. There's the name for it. It's called the freshman 15.
Mm-hmm. For that reason.
Yeah. And so it was one of those things like very normal thing happened to her. But because she had this poor parenting on eating habits at home and these messages from the outside world that you're supposed to be skinny, it turned into a horrible thing that happened to her. And then she turned that into, if you are gaining weight, it's because you are sinful and terrible. And so we have to fix that. And that to me is just like, oh man, like you just needed therapy. Then when you look at like how her divorce went down and the way that she sort of rose to power, it's sort of the same thing. It's like, this is not a woman who was meant to be a happy housewife. But she was forced into that role, and this is how she fought her way out of it. And it's fucked up and terrible. Again, what would have happened if she had more choice in what kind of life she wanted to lead? If she had a therapist to work through this shit with and not just decided that like the way to happiness was to use all of the manipulation and power that was used against her was to turn it around on everybody else, right? And right. I think there's so much when you're like, they don't really say it outright a lot, but there's so much here where it's like she was not happy in the role that being a Southern Christian woman placed her in. And she found a way out. And it was not a good way out, to say the least.
Well, I mean, she grew up in the Church of Christ, where basically women were, not to be. There's one episode named Seen But Not Heard. And that's the episode where they go into her backstory about her being in the Church of Christ. And that's very much how the Church of Christ works. That is, you but if you're a woman, you sit down, you shut up, and you do what your man commands you to do.
Well, and her husband was a pastor as well, so it was very like everyone's watching.
Yeah. So, but I mean, there is a bit of the idea that she grew up in that, and she still talked about being submissive to men, even though she was running the church, which was a wild kind of thing to watch.
She said something like, how fun it can be to be submissive. And it's like, lady, you are in charge of everyone. You're supporting your husband financially and in every other way. Like, what the fuck are you talking about? If you were having fun being submissive, you'd be with your first husband and you wouldn't be running a multi-million-dollar business masquerading as a church if you were having fun being submissive. Because you'd still be with the first guy having fun.
Yeah. You know, that whole trad wife thing. Get to it.
Yeah. Oh, it's so fun. Like, you could have been making your own better, honey.
Also, I'm going to say this as someone who I was born in Miami. I don't really consider that the South. I think Florida kind of is its own thing, if that makes sense.
It sort of is, yeah.
So, and then I moved up north when I was 4. So I'm not a Southerner, but man, when I just hear this sort of Southern, well, everybody's Christian, everybody does the same thing. And that rankles me right away. I don't know why that irritates me. It's like, oh, well, we're Southerners. We have a very different special relationship with Christ and blah, blah, blah. Like, you're Christian. Like, they all think they have the right answer. And they all think they have a special relationship with God.
There was so much weird shit being said by like the journalists and people about like how her specifically she thought her church was the only true church. It's like, oh, shut the fuck up. You think your church is the only true church. Yep. Like, what? All of them say that.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
it's like the same thing where they say there's only one true religion. Okay, well, according to you, if you had been born somewhere else, there's probably a good likelihood that you would think that is the true religion. Like, it's
the other things they talked about, the restoration gospel, this crazy belief that one church would be the church that was modeled after Jesus's church. Like, the fucking Catholics believe that, the Mormons believe that. I'm sure there's a dozen other Christian sects that believe that. That's not weird. And I think there's something like, this is sort of like when we did the last episode where it's like they're talking about a lot of things that are normal in the culture and pretending that they're weird so that it sounds crazier to people. It's like, you don't have to make this sound crazy to people. She said that people in concentration camps were happy because they were skinny. That's enough. That's it. It's already crazy.
That should be the end right there.
Yeah. You have to pretend that these things they're doing that numerous other mainstream Christian churches do are crazy. The part about starving people to death is crazy. That's as far as it needs to go. We're good there.
Yeah. It is just I don't know. I said when we first started watching this, I was like, God, I hate organized religion. I don't care if you worship whatever. I don't care. I really don't. I just want you to keep it away from me and keep it away from other people. If you like the way you do that, you just leave other people alone. Then fine, whatever. As long as you're not harming yourself or somebody else, great. But like these kind of things, it's just like there is no, oh, we're just doing our own thing. We're doing our own thing and we need to bring more people in. And the reason they want to bring more people in.
Well, and a big part of it is the shit that people say organized religion is good for, or specifically church is good for. None of these fucking churches do. None of the ones that we cover. I mean, I'm not talking about, any random person specific church.
Right.
Do you think anybody in that church was going to get like financial assistance if their investments went bad and they went broke? No. Do you think anybody in that church was going to get the kind of support that Gwen did when she was just getting a divorce because she fucking felt like it? Were they going to get the only people who got support in that church? The situation they were in would reflect poorly on the church. Then the church would put the actual institution would put everything behind making that go away. But that doesn't mean they actually gave a shit about the people. They weren't sitting by their bedside praying with them. They were just like, we'll pay for all your lawyers so we don't get in trouble, which is very different.
Yeah. Like the Smiths with the murder of their child. They threw scats of money and time. Yeah.
They murdered their child in a church service. Just for anybody at home that didn't watch.
Yep.
It happened in a church service.
Yeah, because it happened in the church and they knew it reflect poorly on them, they did this whole thing where they put all these lawyers out. And the problem was the evidence was so much that there was no way, no amount of money, you were going to be able to get out of that. But the way that they kind of look at how to help people, they were not interested in helping people. Like there was no reverence. There's no like, oh, well, we had these people and you didn't hear a lot. Let's pray for this person because they have blah, blah, blah. You didn't hear shit
it's their fault.
that.
Yeah, it's their fault if something bad is happening. And I think that's like, I firmly believe that if the Smith's child had died at home, that the church would have just been like, we don't even really know who they are. They may have attended, they may have not. It's actually a very large church.
I didn't know them.
Yeah.
Sorry, there's a certain person in mind when I keep hearing all these certain notes we're hitting. Very, very similar to someone else we're all aware
because
of.
The defense basically was, we never said that. We never said that. We never, ever, 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 ever said to beat your children. We never said that it was okay. Blah, 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 blah. It's like, but it happened in a church service. So if it wasn't okay, why didn't anybody stop them? And
there was also plenty of evidence of them talking about hitting people with glue, hitting their kids with glue sticks, spanking them. So like, yeah, that was all nonsense.
The glue stick thing is from Train Up Your Child, which we talked about, I think, in the Duggar episode.
See, then many cult things.
Dr. Pearl was one of the people who started this fucking insane trend. And the reason why is because it hurts really fucking bad, but it is unlikely to leave a bruise. They talk about this a little bit in the documentary, but they don't discuss, I guess, the effect. Like, usually if you say you're a mandatory reporter and you're like, I have reason to believe that this child is being beaten, they're going to look for physical signs of that. And with the glue stick, you're unlikely to find them. But they could do serious damage, as we see. And this death was so violent and so many different things that could have caused death happened to this child. They literally could not determine which horrible thing killed him.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's important to remember that, again, when a death is that violent and it happens in a public place, the fucking people in that public place are absolutely responsible for how they chose to react or not react. It is impossible for me to imagine being in a room full of people hearing and seeing this happen and being okay with it. I'm not going to describe what happened. I don't think we need to do that here. If you are curious, the documentary, there's no way that the people around them didn't notice, period. There's no way.
Yeah. And plus there was that one lady who said that when she was babysitting him, that kid who had eventually died was upset. And she asked him, what do we do to, kind of get him calm to center? And he just said, hit him hard.
Yeah.
And then she's like, well, I'm not doing that. I'm like, imagine being a babysitter in a church. And the dad's like, just crack the shit out of him.
What's so weird to me about that is that she wasn't a member of the church. They didn't start using members of the church as babysitters until after that. She quit because of that.
Yeah.
But the other thing I really bugged me about that is they talked about like, oh, they had so many, he was actually kind of a problem child. He had a lot of things going on. He really needed help. And then they discussed like he was always acting out. He would hide knives under his bed. He threatened to kill the baby. And I'm like, well, okay. How much of that is a result of the fact that he was being abused?
Yeah.
Or how much of that was even true? Or just an excuse to get away with it? Because I'm going to tell you this. There's a lot of people in that documentary who talk about the advice that they got to literally beat their kids from Gwen Shamblin who didn't do it or did it once or twice and said, I cannot do this. These people did it. They did it a lot. They did it often. They likely murdered their first child who died 11 weeks earlier.
Yeah.
They took the advice as permission to be as cruel as they fucking wanted to be. That is what I believe with all my heart. This was not misguided. This child did not die because they didn't know that the things they were doing were dangerous. This child died because his parents beat the shit out of him on a regular fucking basis. Gwen Shamblin did tell people, though, to beat their kids until they shut up. She didn't say it in those words, but that's what she was fucking telling them.
Well, obedience was like a very common thread for all of it. Everybody, you need to be, not just the kids, like everybody needs to be obedient. The thing is, they were talking about these services were like 3 hours long, and you have kids.
It's not
possible. It's not possible for kids to sit the fuck still for 3 hours.
No.
Like that's just if you've ever had kids and you know when they're, let's say you have a 4-year-old and a 6-year-old, there's no way in hell they're sitting still for 3 hours.
It's just not okay to expect them to. Like, honestly, in this, they had this whole bit, right, where they're like, oh, isn't it beautiful that all the children are here with us? They're hearing the same message that we're hearing. And it's like, no, because they're not, first of all. You know, my grandma used to take me to church when I was a little kid. She brought a coloring book. She knew. I don't know why she felt the need to bring me, because she knew I wasn't paying any attention. Kids aren't capable of like receiving a 3-hour long lecture on anything, let alone fucking esoteric shit. Like
esoteric stuff. It's good.
Some esotericism is very interesting and very fun, but probably not the stuff that was happening there, and it still wouldn't be appropriate for children. So
fair point. So there's a lot of different stuff. Like I said, there's just so many different inroads and crossroads to all of this. So go ahead.
I think maybe, so we talked about quite a bit of things. So I think I'd like to talk a little bit about one of the storylines that seems to weave through all of the episodes, which is the girl Delaney. She came from some other Christian faith with a dad who thought literally that if I just go to her boyfriend's dad and say no, then everything will be better. I won't have to worry about anything. They'll never date again because, like, man to man, don't let your son date my daughter. And that's how it works in the South. I don't know. Do you want to give like maybe the brief rundown of why the parents had an issue with it in the first place? And then maybe we get into like, I find this case fascinating because they did so many things wrong, but clearly a few things right. And I think it's interesting. And maybe one of our bigger messages, one of the reasons why I can justify taking so much time out of my life to watch the stuff and talk to people about it is that there are things to learn. So,
yeah. So the parents are Gwen and Carrie, and they live in the same neighborhood. They attend a different church, and one of these kids, I want to say his name was Jackson.
I think so.
It's another very white name who was, I guess, very well liked in the is it Remnant?
Yeah, by now it's called Remnant. It started out as something else. Yeah.
Yeah, but he was part of that church and met Delaney, who was apparently a sort of a shy girl, not necessarily introverted, but kind of just liked her own things and kept to herself mostly. And this kid kind of latched onto her, and like she would go to church with this kid. And, I guess, the way Glenn and Carrie would characterize it, well, at least she was kind of like, they figured, well, she's going to church. At least she's going to church. Okay, well, great. And they did seem to think that there's something a bit off about this Jackson kid. And, Delaney, I guess they found out that Delaney had been secretly dating him, and they had these things like just messages basically that were, I guess they didn't really explore it, but they made it sound like they were explicit.
I got the sense that they were emotionally abusive. That was my read, but you're right. They don't say outright, but just because Jackson's family was fine with it after Delaney's father showed them the messages, I feel like it was probably more in line with the kind of crazy, awful shit that people in remnant church say to each other than it was sexually explicit, because sexually explicit would be like, you're right. I don't want my son knocking up your Christless daughter, whatever, that was my read.
Yeah. So, they're not really cool with all this. Like you said, Glenn goes and talks to the dad, and that just goes nowhere. So Glenn decides to go and get like somebody who is formally with the remnant church to try to talk her out of it. And it very much has the opposite effect, because Delaney runs away that night.
Well, not only so I have in my notes a couple places just like they did everything wrong, but that's not true, and we'll get to that. But they didn't just say, can you speak to this former member and just hear the other side of it? They also scheduled it for an evening where she was expected to be at church for a time she was expected to be at church.
Yeah.
And it's just like, oh, come on, guys. Like, obviously, like she agreed to it to make you happy, and then she started trying to get out of it, and then you wouldn't let her out of it, so she did it, and then she packed her shit and left. Which, well,
they did also before this find a burner phone in her desk, so they were going through her stuff. So
right. Well, and I think being a parent of a teenager is really fucking hard, right? I feel very strongly about my teenager having privacy, to the point that sometimes I have to be like, if you don't clean that room, we're going to have to get a fucking hazmat squad in here, because I'm not going in to clean it. It's your room. I'm not going to go through your stuff, but it's bad in there, right? I feel I'm not a take the door away parent. I'm not I put your laundry away parent. Partially laundry because I'm lazy, but also just like, it's not, I hated that shit when I was a kid. My mom never put my laundry away unless there was something that she wanted to know. You know what I mean? Otherwise it was my job.
Yeah.
So, but then there are times where you're like, but I did just hear about how every single one of their friends is smoking pot, and it seems weird that mine says they're not,
Right.
Whatever. That's not a real example, but I'm saying, like, like you're like, oh, I do kind of want to know, and I'm not sure they would tell me. And in this case, if it was, and again, it's speculation, but if it was sexually explicit, they're Christian too, so they're all fucking in a tizzy about that. And if it was emotionally abusive, then that is actually really concerning. So part of me empathizes with that, even though I don't think it's the right move.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. So yeah, I'm very much on the same side of you with like, your kids deserve some sort of privacy. I mean, if there's something that you suspect is truly wrong, I feel like then you have license to be like, I just need to make sure everything's okay.
Right. And but I
do something
often backfires though,
Yeah.
And it did in this case. They found the burner phone. That didn't make anything stop. I think in many ways it made things worse on both sides, because now they're like, this church is actually like, because it wasn't just her boyfriend. It was other members of the church. It was grown-ass adults that were encouraging her to have a burner phone. And as a parent, if I found out that was happening with any group of adults, religious or not, I don't know what I'd do.
Yeah.
It would terrify me.
Yeah. Because
as a rule, nobody should be telling you to keep shit from your parents if you're a minor. Like that red flag city, unless your parents are abusive, and hers were not, as far as we know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I mean, like you said, they made a lot of mistakes. I think their heart was in the right place, but I just think that they went about things the wrong way, and they felt like they were losing their daughter, and they were, because she was getting sucked into a cult. But they also weren't sure how do you combat that in that instance where you were in it, when you are also a Christian and you are also deeply imbued in a faith, and this other faith is there, and they're pulling you into something you're not sure about. How do you?
Well, I think it's even more complex than that, or maybe simpler than that. Maybe, I don't know. Like, as somebody who's definitely not Christian, I would feel all kinds of ways about my kids starting to go to a Christian church of any kind, no matter what. I would be so like, man, I've fucking been there and done that, and I don't want that for you, no matter what. And I would find it very hard to deal with, because as a parent, my goal is like, whoever you are, I want you to feel safe being that person. And it's like, God forbid that means that you're a fucking Christian or Republican, but I have to stand by what I said, right? So I think it's complicated no matter what. Like, as soon as you find out that there are adults purposefully turning your child away from you. It doesn't matter like what the spiritual religious beliefs are, if it truly is abusive or not. It's like something is wrong. And I get that, like, we have to stop this. But what we know from doing the show a lot and from, you know, our interests that led us to want to do the show anyway, is that never works. You can't stop it. The only thing that you can do if your loved one is getting involved in a cult is try your best to be somebody that they can talk to without feeling like they are turning their back on the people or the belief system in the cult. And she's a minor, so it's complicated. They're her parents. They still think they have control. You know, I am not saying they did everything wrong because they're bad parents. I'm saying they did everything wrong because who fucking knows what you're supposed to do when your teenager joins a cult, except for maybe you and me, Doug. Like, you know, it's like, yeah. So they were very combative. And I feel like it's like that was never going to work.
Yeah, I mean, they come off as like they were trying to make it seem like it was not combative. Like they were just like, well, we just, you know, and you know, that wasn't quite how it went down. So, and again, if you were, I mean, we've all been teens, and when your parents are like, don't do that, what's the first thing you think well, why not? I want to know why don't you want me to do that? So
one of the things that I had so many mixed emotions about, like I was very happy for them, but it was also very heartbreaking to me in the way that he talks about it, is he told her, I will not attend your wedding. If it is held at that church or Gwen Shamblin preaches there, I cannot do it. And she actually changed the location of the wedding and promised him that Gwen would not be there at all. To me, that says she really wants a relationship with her parents, because she didn't have to do that.
No, she didn't. And in a lot of cult settings, they wouldn't allow that.
Right. And he even said lots of their family members were not on their side because they thought like, oh, you're just sad that your little girl's growing up. It's a Christian church. Who cares? Right. So they were at the wedding. She did not have to do it. She would have still been able to have aunts and uncles and everybody. She did that because she wants a relationship with her parents. And he attended the wedding. He gave her away, all of that. But then he's talking about it and he's saying like, I lost my daughter. It's like, but you didn't. She wants a relationship with you. And if you maintain a relationship with her, well, you're talking about this fear that someday she's going to want to leave and she's not going to be able to. She will be able to if you maintain a relationship with her.
Yeah, if you keep the lines of communication open. Yeah.
Right. And so it's just, to me, it's like, obviously they're doing something right, or they did enough right as she was growing up that she does not want to just cut contact. But there's something in there that's like, you know that it's wrong and you're so worried about parenting her out of the wrong decision that you're forgetting that you can't actually do that. And that if you want to really win here, you win by being that place she can go where the sanity reigns and where she can see what the rest of the world is like, and that she can talk to you openly and know that you're not just going to tell her, leave your husband in your church, because nobody's going to do that just because daddy said so. Yeah. And like you said, a lot of people are going to dig in deeper specifically because daddy said so.
Yeah. I will say I kind of get their concern from the giddy up, because the Jackson guy was like this smirky, smarmy, just I know everything kind of looking kid. And that was just that just, I looked at them like, oh, like I get it. I wouldn't want my daughter dating somebody like, just you look at them and you go, I hate to judge a book by its cover, but like it just, he had that vibe.
I've never met a teenage boy that I'd be like super thrilled about my kid dating. I'm going to be honest. Like, teenage boys are not the greatest specimen. They really need a little bit of time to percolate. Like,
they need a little more.
You don't want your teenage daughter dating a 20-something-year-old either. So you deal with what you have, right? If you have a child that's attracted to men or males, then you just deal with the fact that the teenage version of men, they're just not great.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like they just need a little more time proofing before they come out and be made into a loaf of bread.
A loaf of bread. Good. I thought you were making an alcohol reference because this is Cult Bar.
No, but that could work too. Maybe they need a little more proof to get their head straight. I don't know.
Yeah, they need to age a little bit in the oak barrel. But yeah, but you're right. He was like, there's no teenage boy that has got his shit together enough for me to be happy. And then there's like, oh, here's the example of the worst possible version of a teenage boy who doesn't have his shit together, and he's dating your daughter.
Yeah, and he's a kid of affluent.
Part of a weird church.
Part of a weird church. He's from an affluent family, so he's never had any major adversity, probably. Always kind of got what he wants. So yeah, that's just. I could see why they were like alarm bells were going off for them, but yeah.
Yeah, I would hate it. And I'm not saying necessarily that I would behave any differently if I didn't have the knowledge that I have. But, I don't. Well, here's the other thing. This is something, I don't know if you've noticed this, Doug, but what I've noticed is that people don't seem to know that cult deprogramming in the 70s didn't work. People seem to think that it was a good thing and that it accomplished something, right? But if you follow this stuff and you're into it, you know that actually lots of those people just ran away and went right back, or they cut off their families altogether. That a lot of the deprogramming was just as mentally harmful and traumatic as the cult programming. It just doesn't fucking work. What we know, and maybe this is important in our current political environment in the US for reasons that if they are not apparent to you, you're probably watching the wrong show. It's important to know that you cannot talk somebody out of a cult. You cannot kidnap them away and re-brainwash. There's no Clockwork Orange shit going on. You have to just be somebody who can set some appropriate boundaries while keeping the line of communication open. And it is so fucking delicate, and it might even be impossible, but that is the only thing that works. That's it. You can't tell your QAnon friend or your Trump voter friend or your member of fucking Remnant Church, you're wrong. It won't fucking work. And we see it every day, and people still think that eventually it's going to work. It's not. It just doesn't work.
Yeah, I mean, I've been guilty of it with, I'm going to use a Trump supporter as the people that are Trump supporters, true Trump supporters, you can't tell them anything. They're just not there. They're so bought in, and they also cannot admit that they're wrong, because admit they're wrong, because you see their guy that they are following never admits that they're wrong ever. So why would they? If he's never wrong, well, I'm not wrong.
Someday we're going to do Heaven's Gate. This is my promise to anybody who watches the show. Someday we're going to do it. But part of the reason I'm not in a hurry is because the first time that I went in depth on Heaven's Gate, I found myself bursting into tears on my way to get a fucking breakfast burrito, and I'd turn around and go home and skip breakfast because I was too upset. I was listening to a podcast. It wasn't just like, I wasn't just thinking about it. But because what you find with Heaven's Gate is that at the end, they didn't believe it anymore. And it's really obvious. And when we get into it someday, you'll understand what I mean here, but they did not believe it anymore. They did not kill themselves because they thought that they were going to ascend. They killed themselves because they had nowhere else to go. That admitting that they were wrong, that's for some of these people, 20 fucking years of their life. They have no marketable skills. They have no friends or family left. They have nothing. They go back into the world. They're not going to qualify for the most basic fucking job. They had nothing left. And I think people need to understand that when people go all in, especially for a long time on anything, that you are much more likely to see a massive tragedy than a massive change of beliefs, because admitting that you have sacrificed your entire life, that you have given everything, that you have been duped that hard, that things suck that bad, that everyone else was right, is something that goes against every single protection that our brains have to make us want to be alive in the first place, right? You go through life with the general belief that you kind of know what you're doing. Hopefully you don't 100% believe you know 100% of what you're doing, because You definitely don't. But, you know, but the reality is that I think that's the other side of it, is that if you don't create a space where it's safe to be wrong, no one ever admits that they're wrong. Not when it's this bad. And when it's not very bad at all, if it's dangerous to be wrong, you're still going to fucking dig your heels in and say, I'm right, because why would you expose yourself to danger? And I think it's very troubling to me because of what we're living through right now in the United States, and the way that it seems like there is a massive portion of our country that is fully bought in a way that is this dangerous. But people don't snap out of it. It doesn't happen like that. It is a long, slow, and excruciating process that most people never complete when they are this deep into a harmful belief system, especially when it starts to harm them. Mm-hmm. Especially. And I'm not saying that you need to be nice to the people in your life who voted against your interest. I'm not saying you have to have barbecues where you invite your Trump supporting neighbors over. I'm just saying that the idea that you're going to talk these people out of what they believe with facts is like, no, you're fucking not.
Yeah, fair. So I'm not going to get into a whole conversation about Trump stuff because I could talk about that all day.
That is probably the biggest bummer that we're going to talk about for this entire episode. And there's so many big bummers in this episode. So, sorry.
Can we divulge into the idea of, from a very religious perspective, there's a point where Gwen Shamblin decides she's going to make her own religious church. Like she's got to deviate from the church she's part of and make her own. And that's where Remnant Fellowship comes out of. But the big thing was she basically said there is no Holy Trinity, it's only God. And in religious circles, especially in Southern Christianity, that is a big thing to do and to say.
So you said this, and I feel a little confused. Well, because it's confusing. So I would love it because I feel confused by what happened there. And like you're saying, it is a huge deviation. If you can give your understanding of it, of what she believed on this, because to me, I thought she was saying it's just Jesus who is God, which is still the Trinity. So it's confusing to me.
Well, I think when you do the Trinity, there is the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost. And the Holy Ghost is the part she's leaving out.
Okay, I see what you mean. Okay.
So that's the part that she's leaving out of the equation. She's saying all things Jesus, all things God. And she's making them one and the same. And they are in their own... there's a lot of weird shit with how that
there
works.
Is, because the Trinity doesn't make any fucking sense. That's part of the problem.
It really doesn't.
My understanding of the Trinity is that the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit or Ghost are all the same thing, but they're also not all the same thing.
Okay.
And her belief is that there is no Holy Spirit and or Ghost, but Jesus and God are definitely the same thing. Does that sound like what you got from it?
Yes. Okay. Just imagine that from her perspective, the Holy Ghost isn't really part of this equation. And yes, in Christianity, I mean, I was raised Lutheran, basically like Catholic light, but the Trinity is important to them. It's part of just how their whole thing works. And to just basically say, ignore that, it's just Jesus or God. And especially in Southern Christianity, that is not how they roll. That is a common thread. Is they all are of the Trinity. That is all.
That is why so many people say that Mormons aren't Christian, because Mormons believe that. Well, it's so weird, right? Because to me, this is all the same thing. Like it really, like it's the difference between you drink wine or grape juice, or you eat bread, or you eat a wafer. Like it's all the same to me. But Mormons believe that there's the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, but they're three distinct beings. And then mainstream Christianity says there's the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, and they are three distinct beings, but they're also the same thing. And Gwen Shamblin says there's the Father and the Son, and they're the same thing, but they're also distinct things, but fuck the Holy Spirit. And I'm like, I just don't understand why this is that big of a controversy. That's just how you choose where you go to church, right? To me, like, maybe it's part of this like decades long deconstruction that I've done to like get free of my weird ass background. But like, I just cannot imagine putting that much effort into giving a shit about what other people believe when the differences are so minute.
Because to them, they're, as we say, they all think they have the one true faith, the one true way to believe. We see it with Christian factions all the time saying those people aren't real Christians, those people aren't real Christians. It's all bullshit. But like the notion that she had the audacity to, one, be a woman in the preacher pulpit in the South, not okay. Even though she proclaimed she wasn't a preacher.
Yeah. But I absolutely love this weird detail of the story, right? She leaves her husband, which, number one, what? And then she's like, I'm starting my own thing. But this calculated, really intensely fucking smart, diabolical, but smart thing that she did, where she took the men who were doing what she said the best and said, actually, they are part of this like board and they're actually in charge of me.
Even though that wasn't the case, but that's what she put out. And,
right. And people were like, yeah, sure. And it's like, but you guys, they couldn't, what the fuck? She told them what to do and they did it. That's how they qualified. They're obviously not in charge, but everyone's like, no, it makes sense. Like there has to be men in charge, and they are obviously in charge because that's how it works.
Well, there's also the fact that, but her first husband was somebody who she was married to for 40 years. It was a long time she was married to him. And
who was a preacher himself with a Master of Divinity.
Yeah. And he was never on stage. And why was he never on stage, do you think?
I didn't fucking agree with her.
I think it's because he was not a thin man. And he didn't fit in with her view of her like statement of skinny is godly. And he was not skinny.
But I also think before that could even be a consideration, I don't think he agreed with it for several reasons. One, because the shit she was doing was bonkers, but two, because it just doesn't go like the parts that aren't bonkers to me are bonkers to a man with a Master's of Divinity preaching at church in the South. And she was just setting fire to so much of that. And that is interesting to me because she is the one who left him and not the other way around, where I do actually believe that if he had divorced her and he had said, this fucking devil woman thinks that she can preach the gospel even though she's a lady, and she thinks that she's more important and more educated than a man with a Master's of Divinity who's been doing this for 45 or however long, there's something wrong and I can't be associated with it. And it would have been fine. Nobody would have given a shit. The fact of the matter is that people did give a shit that she divorced her husband, just not enough for it to make a impact on the way she moved forward.
Well, and the thing is too, is like she within 4 months had married this Joe Lara guy. I mean, within 4 months, like, so clearly that shit was orchestrated. She divorced him on the purpose. I believe that.
I will say this. I think there's a very good chance you're right. I also think that in my experience in extremely religious cultures is that being divorced or even widowed means you better hurry up and get the fuck married. And so it doesn't necessarily shout to me that she was having an affair or that she knew she had a soft place to land so much that maybe part of the reason the guy who was known for using women to support his crazy lifestyle found the richest one yet and was able to get right in.
Yeah.
The other side of that, though, is I think it's really fucking weird that this documentary, or at least the people in it, seem to take the stance that, like, there's no possible way that he loved her. I think it's very possible that he loved her. He loved money and she had a lot of it. And it's apparent from the stories they told about all, like, he wasn't really running scams on these women, right? He would get involved with them and he wouldn't have a job and they would support him and they'd be happy to until he started acting like an ass and then they wouldn't be happy to anymore and they would dump him and he'd move on to the next woman. Apparently, he never acted like big enough of an ass for Gwen to even stop buying him fucking airplanes. If he saw his job as treating women right, he found the perfect job.
Yeah.
He wasn't able to complete it in other places, either because the money wasn't good enough or he didn't really love those women or a combination thereof. But he, to the literal bitter end, managed to make it work with her.
Well, you know,
in love with another asshole. It's super easy.
True. Very easy. They didn't really mention the age difference. And, you know, I had said many times that age differences really bother, like significant age differences really bother me.
Well,
really bother me.
Isn't it? And he looks so good. I mean, to me, he doesn't. He's that's not who you need to be to get my attention. But from a very like beauty standard, Southern, whatever way, he's younger. He's got the blue eyes. He's got like the right cut of the face.
Yeah. And he was Tarzan in Manhattan. So there's that. He was the actor who did that. So maybe there's that. And he was an actor. So, I mean, he did act, but, you know.
But so. I don't know. I think it's so weird that it's like it has to hinge on, because he was sort of a romance scammer, that he had to be romance scamming her, because I think it's very possible that he wasn't purposefully scamming anybody, that he just kind of sucked and didn't want to work.
Yeah, and yet somehow you know? He didn't work. Yeah, he didn't work, but somehow he had a pilot's license early on. Pilot's licenses are not fucking cheap.
Okay, but here's
cheap to become a pilot.
About that, because they save this until the very end, that his girlfriend who's in this custody battle with him, ex-girlfriend who's in this custody battle, also had a pilot's license. What circles were these two running in where everybody had a fucking pilot's license? Nope. That is so weird to me. And she does say like he didn't get to fly for years because he didn't have the money, because it's fucking expensive. But like, I don't know anybody with a pilot's license. Or if I do, somebody's so far separated from me in my 6 degrees that I don't remember that they have one.
I know one person who has a pilot's license. I knew 2 actually, but one of them died in a plane crash.
I knew you were going to say that, and I was trying. Actually, he didn't. But I did anyway.
But he didn't die in a plane crash. I should clarify. His plane, one plane engine caught on fire, and he landed. And he got out of his plane, but he had someone in the plane with him who he didn't realize was incapacitated by the smoke.
Oh
and
shit!
He went back to the plane. He went back to get in the plane. The plane exploded and killed him. And
that's rough. I actually know somebody who died that way due to a car crash, and so yeah, not a good way to go. But
the other person I know is my father-in-law's brother, whatever the hell that makes him. He was a commercial pilot.
So we talked about this before the show. When they started making this documentary, Gwen and Joe had not died. Yep. There was not a plane crash yet. The plane crash happened while they were filming, and they sort of had to like tack a whole bunch on the end of the 3rd episode about it, and then be like, we'll get back to you on that. Now, by the time you and I are watching it for this show, they've gotten back to us. But when I watched it the first time, they had not. It was just the 3 episodes. What we get is a little bit of debate on what might have happened.
Yeah.
Because no one actually knows what happened. Let's be clear about that. There's no proof of there's no evidence that supports any one theory. So one theory is he was only licensed to fly in good visibility, and he was flying in inclement weather. And they talk about how in inclement weather, you can become very disoriented and you have to rely only on your instruments, which is why it's a different license.
Yeah.
And so it's possible that he tried to correct something he thought was happening that wasn't actually happening, and that caused the crash. That it was just, he shouldn't have been fucking flying that day. That's one theory. Another theory is that he did it on purpose. And another theory is that something was wrong with the plane that did not cause obvious damage to the engines or anything. So maybe it was the controls were off or whatever. At the time this documentary was released, we don't know. What do you think about the middle one?
I don't see it. I don't see it because no. Well, yeah, a bit, but
right.
I feel like he was the kind of guy that was going to try to live out as long as he possibly could the way he wanted to live. And he got everything he wanted from Gwen. Money, cars, planes, he got all of that. Now we can't account for depression or something that was in the works that we didn't know behind the scenes because nobody knows. But to make the decision to intentionally crash a plane really fast into 8 feet of water, they said he was dropping 30,000 feet a minute, which is great. That's like going straight down. And the lake they landed in, where they hit in the lake, was 8 feet of water, which means you went straight in and hit the ground underneath the water. There's no way you didn't. And
so what I wonder,
make the decision to kill everybody in the plane with you, I feel that's psychopath area, and he didn't really exhibit any of that stuff.
Well, we don't know if he did or didn't, right? It's kind of like a very skewed view of who he was, which was mostly negative, but isn't he charming, right? What I wonder about in this culture that Gwen created, where keeping up appearances was everything, and you're never allowed to be sad about anything, and you're certainly never allowed to have marital issues, we don't know what was going on behind closed doors at all.
No, we don't.
We have no idea if maybe she was starting to get tired of paying for his lifestyle, or she was or he was just sick of her and didn't like the prenup or whatever. And I'm saying this is pure speculation because there's no evidence of this. I think the most likely explanation is that he shouldn't have been flying that day, that he was not a scheduled pilot to be flying that day. That I believe is the most likely explanation. But I do think there is a possibility, given the way that he reacted in the custody battle he was in the middle of, and the fact that we have no idea what the relationship was like behind closed doors, that he might have family annihilator tendencies. So taking those people with him, because they were all very close to Gwen, maybe felt like that. That is, again, pure speculation. Please don't fucking sue me. I'm not saying it's a fact. I don't fucking know. But what we know about family annihilators is that nobody fucking thinks they're going to be a family annihilator until they do it.
Well, there is also the thing that, but he has that he did have a little bit of burn it down mentality. If you think about with his custody battle with Natasha, where he claimed she sexually abused their kid and got her arrested. And I'm like, you have to be an especially kind of fucked up to do that. To falsely accuse somebody.
To even, I have been so fucking angry. I've been through a divorce.
So have I.
Luckily without children, but you had children. And so maybe you can speak to this part of it. But all of the fucking crazy fantasies I had about what would make it easier or better or would feel just, I never thought, let me accuse him of the most heinous crime. The thing that everybody agrees is the worst possible thing a person can do. Never fucking once did it cross my mind. And to think that could cross your mind when it is your own child feels even more intensely weird to me.
Yeah. And, I went through a divorce and my kids were very young at the time. And it was a mess because of the kids. But never once did I think that was something. I never crossed my mind. Not once. Never.
My divorce was horrible and took longer than we were married to finish. And I never once thought of anything like that.
Yeah. I mean, our divorce was fairly quick because I was the one who requested it. And there's a lot of reasons why that I won't get into because that's my personal shit that I don't feel everybody needs to know.
To do it.
But
we don't either.
Yeah, but there was a lot of difficulty in navigating how we were going to handle the kids. At the beginning, it was very difficult. And her and I now are fine. We're friendly. We talk a lot about our kids and try to make sure, even though our kids are all adults, there's still things we need to talk about. And try to, hey, this is going on, blah blah blah, and we're fine. But it was rough, but man, never in a zillion years would I have thought to say anything like that. Never.
Well, and you get to I think also your ideal situation when you divorce somebody you have kids with, right? Or a kid with, is like, I don't want to have to make my kids' future graduations, marriages, whatever, fraught. I need to get to a place where I can at least be in the same room as this person. If maybe that means not talking to them, maybe we get somewhere where it means that we can talk. Who fucking knows? But like, as a parent, I don't want my kid to suffer because I don't like their other parent. Right?
Sure.
It seems so out of the blue and so weird. And you have his lawyer on tape saying that in order to move things along, that Joe was willing to say that it didn't happen. And I'm sorry, but if somebody sexually abused my child, there wouldn't be anything that you could tell me, anything that you could give me, any cessation of legal action, especially if I had all the money in the world to fight like he did, that would make me say, no, it didn't happen. Nothing. And so I don't believe that it happened at all. Not just because she makes a great case, but like, there's just nothing supports that this happened, including his own legal representation. No. So to be able to do that just to win, right? That is where I'm like,
yeah, I mean,
could he? I don't know. I don't know the man, never met him. But from the outside looking in, people have done worse things.
For sure. And can we just give a little props to Natasha, because she spent almost $250,000 defending herself and was like, fuck this, I'm defending myself. That is never a good recipe. Almost never does that ever work.
No.
And she just put her nose in books and studied and was able to represent herself and get 50-50 custody against a cadre of very expensive lawyers by then.
And his lawyer even said he's never seen anybody represent themselves that well. That is why he's like, okay, just between you and me, what do we got to do? Because he started to feel like, shit, we're not going to fucking win. And that was even after they tried to make it so that the church couldn't be part of what she was talking about.
Yeah.
And I think, also the way that this was cut and the fact that she is just she comes across as very genuine. I don't know if she really is. I assume she is. I hope she is. When she's telling the story of she remands custody back to Joe and flies back to Chicago where she lives. And the next day her friend is like, hey, is your kid with you? And she's like, no, I, left her with Joe yesterday. Oh, did Joe take her anywhere? Are they on vacation? Did they go to Florida? And she's like, what is going on? And it's like, well, there was a plane crash and the plane is registered to Joe and Gwen. And from that moment, she obviously assumes the worst. She has been fighting to not allow him to fly with their daughter also because she doesn't think he's a good pilot.
Oh, the judges agreed. He wasn't supposed to.
Yeah. And he did anyway.
He did anyway.
Repeatedly did anyway. And of course, what would anybody believe in that moment? She thought her daughter was dead. And because the way the documentary is done, it's very well done. You think her daughter might be dead too. And so the relief, one, that she wasn't, and two, that the cops actually did the right thing, because, oh my God, I was certain that they weren't when we got to that part of the story. Cops did the right thing. They said, you tell me where this child is, or we are coming to your house and arresting you. She got her kid back.
Kidnapping.
Yeah. Oh.
They didn't fuck around.
Great.
Hey, I'm normally I'm normally like an ACAB person, but that cop did shit the right way.
I mean, he might still be a bastard. He probably is, but in that moment,
good job.
Certain things that you need the cops to do because of the world we live in, and he did his job that day, and I'm glad. But what I found really interesting and weird is that when she went with the police to get her daughter, they don't name the daughter or show her face or the face of any of the minors, which I appreciate.
I really appreciated that. Yeah.
She said they were just in a house where all these children were there, and the older ones were taking care of the younger ones, and none of them knew about the plane crash, and they were all the children of the people in the plane crash. That is so fucking weird to me. Because kids pick up on shit, right? What the hell were those kids going through with this weird fucking vibe. And now they're all just here in a house together. They don't know why. Like, what the fuck?
Yeah, it felt like, all right, let's consolidate all these kids into one spot until we figure out what to do. That's what that sort of felt like.
And not like, let's make sure they're with whatever adult they are closest to.
Nope.
Let's make sure they are supported. Let's make sure that they're like feeling comfortable and ready and safe. Like, it was just, to me, just so fucking weird. I can't wrap my head around it. I can't even tell you why I think it's bad.
It just feels bad.
Yeah, it's just like, oh, it was all these orphans taking care of each other and they didn't know that they were orphans yet, is like the fucking, like, what the hell?
Yeah, I want to make 2 quick comments on this. That's side note off just about the crash.
Yeah.
They were in a plane ride and they were going to a MAGA event that was hosted by Michael Flynn and Rudy Giuliani. So again, we see these cults time after time, like the whatever, the one with the lady that was drinking the stuff that made her skin blue, like they were a big MAGA people. But the idea of like they were flying there, and the thing is, Joe Lara is like seemed like kind of just a bit of a shyster and would be like, yeah, I can fly us there. Let's all hop in the plane and go. And that just felt, it's going to sound awful, but like a little bit karmatic that he crashed him into a lake, because he just wasn't like, Natasha even talked about how the fact that he got all these licenses really fast, which is not how it's supposed to go. You're supposed to accumulate tons of hours flying in these conditions to get your license. And he just got them super fast, including like a helicopter license. He wasn't ready to do that.
And I don't know a lot about aviation. I do know that helicopters and propeller planes are not the same.
No, not even close.
I know that. And that was actually one of the reasons that they discussed was a possibility for it being pilot error, is that he was flying a jet and he did not have a lot of experience flying a jet.
Yeah. No, he'd flown the twin prop kind of thing.
Right. Yeah. I look, somebody in the documentary talks about this, like they're not supposed to feel good about it. And I'm like, I fucking don't care. I feel good about it.
Yeah.
That's one of the beautiful things about not being a Christian, is that when someone horrible who is actively hurting people dies, I can just be like, good.
Yeah.
Move on.
I give it to one person, and I forget who the person was in the documentary. Like, it feels bad, but at least I know she's not hurting anyone anymore.
Right. I'm like, that's enough for me, man.
Yeah.
That's enough for me. I am so fucking relieved for Natasha.
Yeah.
Like,
Natasha and her kids, I feel like just like, all right, you're out from under it now.
They opened the documentary telling us that Joe and Gwen died in a plane crash. So you know that going in. And you're hearing this story. I mean, I knew that before I started the documentary also, but like you're hearing the story and you're like, oh, fucking, as long as her kid wasn't in that plane, thank fucking God.
Yeah. Like, because there was a part where she said, I talked to my daughter for the last time, and I was like, oh no.
Yeah. Yeah.
That was just for dramatic effect, I believe.
But I also think, when something that, I mean, I'm sure those moments, those hours, however long it took for them to get back to her and say, your daughter is safe, were the most traumatic moments of her life. And so I feel like she really was reliving that, not trying to kind of be like, let me really pump the drama up, But I mean, you hear her 911 call when she's like, I have to know who's on the plane. And they're like, we have no way of knowing that.
And then she's like, well, we can do a wellness check. Yes, please do that. Like, and that was great that she was quick thinking, let's do that. At least then we could see who's there. Can I make one other comment about a helicopter license that
sure.
Totally unrelated. I was listening to a podcast where Jeff Dunham, who's the guy that does all the ventriloquist dummies.
I fucking hate ventriloquist dummies so much. They scare the shit out of me. But yes, I know who it is.
But he decided he wanted to get a helicopter license. He has enough money to do that. So he did that. One of the things when you're doing a helicopter pilot's test, like you're in the middle of the test, is they make you shut the engines off and drop and figure out how to turn everything on in the middle of a drop.
That's a hell of a test.
That is fucking trial by fire, is it not? Like, holy
what the
shit.
fuck? Okay, because you know what? This is such a weird connection to this, but one of my favorite bands is the Swedish band called Viagra Boys, and they just came out with a new album. And on one of the songs, he's talking about it doesn't matter, but he says that in World War II, most of the deaths were in pilot school. I think in Japan, but I'm not sure. And I'm like, maybe that's fucking why. What the fuck?
Like, all right, so they need to do that so you know how to get out of like a flat spin in case things go wrong. I'm like, great. What the fuck is that? You should know how to do it.
I hope the guy testing you is like, I know exactly what to do.
I hope it's like when you're doing driver
that tells me exactly how long I can let you fuck around before I take over. Right?
I hope the helicopter is like those driver's egg cars where they had like the brakes
brake.
and the gas.
The engine back on foot pedal.
Come on. But yeah, how bonkers is that? Part of your test is we're in the middle of the air. We're 5,000 feet up. I'm going to turn the engine off. And you got to figure out how to get everything back on. Like,
the moment they told me that was part of the test, I'd be like, I'm good. I don't want it anymore.
Yeah. Hey, here you go. I'm good.
I didn't want it to begin with, so it's no big loss for me that you've told me this today. But if I had been working toward a helicopter license and they were like, by the way, in the test, this is going to happen, I'd be like, oh, it's not going to happen because I'm not taking the fucking test.
Yeah. Hey, have a good day. I'm out. Yeah. Sorry, that was a side note.
Imagine if, like, in your driver's ed test that you had to, like, they're like, okay, so for 45 seconds, we're going to cut the brakes and jam the accelerator, and you have to figure out what to do. You'd be like, oh, I don't need to know how to drive.
And slam it into park while you're going 50 miles an hour and watch your transmission fly out the back.
You're going to have to drift if you want to pass your driver's test.
Seriously, one of the freaking craziest things I've ever heard of any test to like do anything is like, hey, we're just going to turn off the engine. You're going to have to figure it out. Like, what?
You got to have fucking the guts you have to be a helicopter. I have a whole new respect for helicopter pilots, and I didn't think that they were all fucking around every day. I already thought that they were doing a hard job, so they need a holiday.
Have you ever listened to things like, so my wife listened to this podcast called National Parks After Dark, and there was also one called Out Alive, where basically people would be out in the elements doing their thing, and they would get trapped or stuck, and people would have to come rescue them. Like the rescue helicopter people, they are on a whole different level because they fly in conditions. It's blizzards, there's wind, they're trying to pick people off the side of a mountain. Like, kudos to you, because like, wow, I could never do that.
I'm telling you, like, I did when I was in the military. There's certain things you have to do. One of the things you have to do is like test to be able to rescue somebody in like a water situation. And I knew I could do it, but once you're out of boot camp, you have the option to just do the minimum and not do the rest. And so that's what I fucking did, because like it's hard.
Yeah.
The last time I said, like, if you get a certain level, you don't have to do it again for a certain number of years. And so like I was like, I know that if I just go all the way through, I can pat myself on the back for having gone all the way through and then never fucking take this test again. So I did. And I'm telling you right now, there's no fucking way that would have prepared me to actually do that in real fucking, like in a real situation.
Real time.
Crashed. And I'm really fucking, your adrenaline is up here and you don't know what's going on. But no fucking way. No way. Maybe because I only did it once because I was a little bit of a shitbag.
Hey, we're both shitbags. It's all good.
But yeah, like, no test is a test of how you would really react in the real situation, except for apparently the helicopter licensing test.
Yeah, I just remember hearing that, and I was like, listening. I'm like, "Are you serious?" Like, really?
Yeah, that's fucking insane. Okay, real quick, I tried to plug my computer in, but the light switch is off, and so I'm going to go off camera for a second to make sure that my thing doesn't die.
All right, I will count. Are you ready? Set.
I'm listening.
Okay. So, yeah. All right. So we got off track there, but sometimes that's the fun stuff, is where you kind of explore all the weird shit on the side. So I think we could maybe start getting into the point where we're talking about, so we had the plane crash, obviously. And now this is where I think it gets really messy. Because there's no real succession plan.
I gotta say,
not really.
Only on this show do we cover divorce, child murder, starvation. We skipped over the forced labor, but that was there too, and a plane crash, and then we go, and now it gets messy.
I know, but it gets messy from like the administrative level. It was messy the whole time. This is just messy where, because the thing is what's crazy is she divorced her first husband, but he was still the executor of her will.
Yes, what the fuck happened there?
If you have a will and you have that much money and that much stuff, like, you know what I mean? Like, but according to Tennessee law, because this all took place in Tennessee, right, is if you're divorced, then you no longer can be the executor of the will. But still, like the idea that she hadn't changed that. I mean, listen, I just recently did a will. I still have to get it notarized. I should have done this years ago. I had a heart attack 3.5 years ago. I should have been on top of this. So I understand sometimes dragging your feet, but like my assets are not much. So
yeah,
I have a lot to distribute. I do not. So that lady had a lot of money and a lot of stuff.
I mean, it's so, like my collection of Stephen King books goes to.
Yeah. Hey, here's my Halo edition of Xbox. All right. One of my sons. Here you go. Have one of my.
Right.
So anyway, because of that, she didn't really. One other side tangent on this is that the idea of like all these kids that, like, part of how you get into this religion, I think, is you basically, if you die, you're supposed to remand your kids to the church.
Yes. I do not understand
forgot about that.
How the fuck that is legal.
Me either.
I don't get it. They really needed to spend more time on that, and unfortunately, I didn't have time to look this up.
It was like it was a very brief thing.
Fucking sense, because to me, okay, like theoretically, if you have minor children, you make a will and you designate a person to take care of your children in the instance that you and the child's other parent both die. Right? First of all, they don't have to recognize that. Okay, the person that you said can be like, actually, I changed my mind. I'm not doing that. Your other family members can be like, no, we're going to go into a custody battle. Like, it's not set in stone. So already you have that. But like, how do you get to an institution? That's not a person.
No.
An institution cannot be trusted with the care of children. We already fucking tried that with orphanages. It didn't work.
Yeah, orphanages are a mess. But but the idea that they did that and they were just expecting like when this happened and Natasha was like trying to find her kid, and her, this Joe's mother was like, oh, it's fine. We'll just take care. No, you are not the next. That is my kid. You don't get to determine that.
Nuts to me. And then they play that fucking phone call where she calls later to Joe's mom and is like, I just want to put this all behind us. And you find out that his mother was continuing the custody battle after he fucking died.
Yep.
No fucking wonder she didn't trust her enough to not record that phone call.
Like, and my wife and I were watching this, and when she said that call came in, I was like, this is a trap. Don't do it. Don't even answer the fucking call. That was my first thought. Don't fucking do it. Just don't do it.
Exactly. And then she's like, I just want to put it all behind us. I was like, she does not.
No, this is some other rim. We don't know, but it seems like there's going to be some shit going on down the pipe. Now, they did show some legal things. They did some legal things where it showed that like her mother-in-law kind of like gave up some things, but I feel like that's
she dropped the custody suit, which is good, but there's nothing. This is the thing, is that the custody suit was based on whether or not Natasha was a fit mother. Between two parents, you can open a custody suit a million fucking times, which I see all the time, and it's terrible, and I think people should really think more about their kids before they do that shit. But they can do it for whatever fucking reason they feel like. But they can especially do it when it is about whether or not one of the parents is fit, because you always have to err on the side of caution with that, right? If I say 100 times that my ex beat our kids. I don't have an ex with kids. This is purely hypothetical. My ex beat our kids. You have to check on that 100 times, because what if somehow 99 times he hit it, or he hadn't hit them recently enough for there to be a bruise, or he never did it 99 times before, but he did it this time. And we have to care for children in that way. We can't let them be in terrible situations, which to me says, well, I just want a relationship with my granddaughter. The moment she has that fucking relationship on her fucking fitness as a parent, I would put money on that. I would bet on it. I mean, just short of betting my life, that it just, there's no way. I'd be like, you may not see this child unless I am there and somebody else is there to be a witness the whole fucking time.
I couldn't agree more. And it just felt like I just felt that's a trap. There's some shit that's got some nefarious shit, because their whole thing is they want kids in the church so they can continue the church. So they're going to try to figure out some way. And here's the thing. If Natasha lets her daughter go to that woman's house, I'm not saying she'll abduct her. I'm saying she will indoctrinate the fuck out of her as much as possible. So I'd be super remiss in wanting that.
This woman knew that her son falsely accused his ex-wife of child molestation. And I say she knew because if she didn't know, she would not have dropped that custody suit.
Nope.
If there was even a fucking percentage of doubt in my mind, then I wouldn't drop that custody suit. I would need it to play out in court. I would need proof that it didn't happen.
Agreed.
And she dropped the custody suit. So she knew that her son lied about the worst fucking thing you could lie about just to get custody, just to be a dick, and did not disown him, did not say, I'm not picking that custody case up now that he's dead, did not reach out in the moment that he died and be like, this is horrible. I lost my son. I know you guys have been through a lot, but I don't want to lose my granddaughter too. What do we need to do to work together on this? Or how do we provide stability? Like there's so many things that she could have, would have, should have done if she was a trustworthy person, if she gave more of a shit about the kid than whatever the fuck is going on. I hated that. I hated it so much.
Oh, I hate it so much too. I'm with you. I just like, ugh. So I'm glad we were both on the same, because like Joel and I were both like, our eyes kind of like opened when she was like taking this call. I'm like, that it feels like the whole Mad Max where Tom Hardy's like, that's bait. Like he's doing that whole thing. Yes. Like that's bait. And that's exactly what that felt like. So, yeah.
So I guess as we're getting closer to the end, there's two things that we have not talked about. Mm-hmm. I mean, there's way fucking more than two things we haven't talked about, but there's two big things we haven't talked about. And that is Gwen Shamblin's son, Michael, and the whole weirdness with Ted Anger, aka Ted Anger, and the influence he had over people, and specifically how the teenagers fared in this situation. Mm-hmm. So I think I want to start with Michael, because if we start to get low on time, I think we can wrap those other things up a little bit faster.
Sure. I would like to talk about one quick thing before we get into Michael, just super quick.
Sure.
So Elizabeth is kind of the heir apparent, right? And the way they made it sound to me, and maybe you saw it different, is that she was doing like almost like Zoom calls for the church services where she talked.
Yeah.
Because of appearances being so important, I am wondering if she maybe gained some weight and didn't want to appear on camera because of all the stress. Well, or maybe she got even skinnier, which was scary because she was really sickly looking.
I think it's the second thing, because they did show some more recent stuff, some stuff after after Gwen died. And then I saw something in preparation for the episode that was talking about her making an announcement. I am not saying this to talk shit about how somebody looks. I am saying this because I feel like it is kind of objective. She looks like a dead person. She does not have any subcutaneous fat. Her skin has no color. Her eyes are sunken. it does appear that her hair is getting thinner because we've seen pictures of her as a teenager. And now it is so upsetting. And then I think it's impossible to believe that being raised that way and being able to live up to being raised that way, it's impossible to believe she have an eating disorder. Eating disorders usually get flared up when there's a need for control. So I find it difficult to think that there was a weight gain before this dramatic loss again. Although we did hear, well, and this is the other thing, we heard from somebody who left the church and was trying to get healthy again, just trying to eat food. And she was basically told she'd done so much damage to her body that her body was going to always pretty much immediately store food as fat for years before it could readjust. Yeah. So I think it's been harder for her to hide that she had gained weight, given that information.
Okay. So that was just a side note of, I was just curious what your thoughts are. That was just my initial thought, was it's one of the two ways.
I think that Gwen Shamblin clearly did not have a view of herself that allowed her to compare herself to any standard of beauty. We talked about this a little bit before the show. And again, this is not like, oh, she's ugly. But like the way she did her makeup was bad. Her hair was bad. Her hairdresser, who, worked for fucking pennies and was lied to about how much she was going to get paid because there's a lot of slave labor in this place too. Her hairdresser talked about, she took really good care of her hair, but then she'd sit down on the chair and they'd have to tease the shit out of it. And it's like, well, normally those two things are mutually exclusive. But I think it talks to this kind of vanity she had where she believed that, like you see with people who get really into plastic surgery and cosmetic procedures, right? Like fillers can make you look younger. But if you just keep getting them and getting them and getting them, they start to make you look really weird. They don't look human anymore. Mm-hmm. But the person getting the fillers doesn't see that when they look in the mirror. They see, oh, I just need a little bit more. And I'm going to be maybe a little bit open here. I've never had an eating disorder, but I have struggled with body dysmorphia. So I'm speaking a little bit from experience. I'm not trying to be judgmental. I really think that Gwen Shamblin had a sort of body dysmorphia that maybe was rooted in narcissism. I'm not forgiving her for anything, but it's like, her hair it got crazier and crazier and crazier as time went on. But I think when you look at standards of beauty, you look at the little tips and tricks you get in Cosmo magazine, like big hair makes your face look small. And I think that when she looked in the mirror and she looked at how her hair was done, she was looking at, does it make my face look small? I think the way she did her eyes, even though they made them look very turned down and kind of sad and droopy, I think she was looking at how it affected the way her cheekbones looked and how it affected the way her chin and her forehead looked. Not, am I accentuating a look that sort of looks like I'm sad all the time? I don't think she saw that. I think it's possible that Elizabeth could see that.
Yeah, that's possible.
She doesn't have body dysmorphia because she almost certainly does. But I think there's an element of like, I know I need to be thin. I know that's the most important thing. But also, what do I do about the fact that I have these dark circles under my eyes that won't go away? I think there's some of that. I think she's a little bit more connected to reality. Or she was. Maybe she's not anymore.
Yeah, I don't know. So, all right. So let's delve into Michael here because that's a pretty important piece to this, I think. So let's start there. Why don't you give us a little bit of the scoop on how that is?
So Michael is Gwen Shamblin's oldest and her son. So the heir apparent to anything, but he was not the heir apparent. It was Elizabeth. And we find that the reasons why that might be is that despite the fact that he was incredibly musically gifted and was often happy to use that in the remnant church, was that his weight went up and down and up and down and up and down, and that his mental health went up and down and up and down and up and down. And he was coming and going from the church quite a bit. I want to be my own person. I want to pursue my own musical career. Okay, actually, I'm happy to be back in the church and perform for the church. And so he was hidden a lot of the time because he was overweight, which wasn't okay. Because he was depressed, wasn't okay. He was married. Much like Elizabeth, it seems like that was orchestrated by Gwen, that he maybe didn't have much of a choice in who he married. Then we find out that he just cheated pretty much nonstop, that this was a known quantity. People knew it happened. We had this is kind of, I feel bad for him, but also he's helping keep the church alive. I feel bad for him, but also he cheated on his wife a whole bunch, right? Like, it's complicated. But one woman in the church wanted out, and she was told point blank, you'll never see your child again. We will put everything we have behind your ex-husband to keep your child away from you if you leave. And so she made a calculated decision, and she said this anonymously, we didn't get to see her face, after seeing Michael eyeing her up at a church event, to pursue him and have an affair with him and present that to Gwen as like, I fucking dare you to go against me. If you go against me, I'll
release it.
And she actually very calculated, and it was for her survival. She actually talked about how sad and broken Michael was. That for her, it wasn't like she was like, it's fine that he cheats on his wife. She wasn't under any spell, right? She was like, oh, this poor wounded bird who has to cheat on his wife because blah, blah, blah. That wasn't where she was coming from. It was very calculated, but she still said he was very broken. He was very sad. She almost felt bad for using him in that way because he was so just fucked up by his mom.
Yeah.
And that's wild, to be as calculated to do that. And I'm not saying anything negative about this woman. I think that she was right. I think if she had not done this, she would not.
I think she didn't have a choice. I think that was her choice. Was like,
but it is calculated. And I think usually when you're that calculated, you have to maintain an emotional distance. And I think it says something that she wasn't able to do that because he was so broken.
Yeah. Yeah. It's, I remember thinking that, and at first blush, you go, oh, well, that's kind of shitty to use it. But she was forced into a point where they were telling her, if you leave, you will not see your kids. And that woman had no money. That woman had no money to be able to go and do any resources to kind of keep her kids.
And he wanted to cheat.
Yeah.
She didn't think to herself, I will find a way to have an affair with Michael. She saw him giving her like lascivious looks and trying to flirt with her and was like, okay, this could
Here's
be
the
it.
way I can use this.
Wow.
Yeah.
And I think I do empathize with that. I think it sucks on many levels that she felt pushed to that. I think it sucks so bad for his wife, who almost certainly knew that he was constantly cheating on her.
Yeah, but it was very much apparent that they said that marriage was not one that he chose. It was what was arranged by his mom. So, and he said to her that basically he was in a loveless marriage. Now, we've heard a million times where guys cheat. Oh, right. I'm in a loveless marriage. And blah, blah, blah. Okay.
Yeah.
I feel like that was actually true.
And I also think, it doesn't matter if it's true or not. You shouldn't do that. There's other options. But so many people in this story either genuinely did not have other options than to do what they did, or genuinely could not see any other option. I think that's true. I think the fact that he would leave and come back shows that there was something in his psyche that told him that he really couldn't just leave. No matter how
but probably he tried to have a career outside of it and it didn't quite pan out the way he wanted. So I think they're just like, he knew he could be a person of prominence in the church.
He is not the world's most inventive or kind of iconoclastic musician. We'll say that.
No, and he was like, and I remember we were listening to this one thing where he did his music, and Joel and I were like, ooh. And then immediately after, it was like, oh, he was such a talented musician. And I was like, maybe on instruments, not singing. That voice was not
on songwriting. Which again, I don't want to fucking shit on, whatever. But I don't want to shit on the guy, but I kind of want to shit on the guy because he did cheat on his wife like a million times. He is still helping keep the church afloat. I don't know about currently, but at the time that the last episodes of the documentary were filmed, he was overweight, sitting behind a piano, talking about how they were going to keep his mom's vision going. It's like, buddy, it's not for you. It's so clear to everybody but you that it's not for you, and that's really sad to me. I have a lot of empathy for him, even though I think if you're over 30, sometimes it's not about your childhood. It's about the choices that you make.
Agreed.
Anyway.
So let's quickly hit on Todd Anger here. Also, Anger is just a great name for him. He gives me the Trumpy son vibes of all Trumpy. My God.
I love that he changed his name to Angers. There's no French word that's spelled anger to my knowledge. I'm not fluent, so I could be wrong. But Angers, Ted Angers.
And he was like, oh, well, it's Angers, actually. I'm of French heritage. Oh, you are? Okay.
Are you? Yeah. Wow.
So anyway, you have a bit more to say on him. I don't have a whole lot to say other than that he was just a shitty person.
He was like the emotional heavy, right? Like he was like the thug, but in an emotional way. So people would not be in line, or people would want to leave, or people would want to do something wouldn't want them to do. And his job was to sit there and berate them until they agreed. We know in at least one case, this poor guy, gay, made friends with a bunch of people in the church, and he thought it was going to be okay. Maybe. Since all these people love me so much, when I tell them that they're gay, they will realize that they're wrong to hate gay people, which is what a sweet little summer child he must have been. He said he told Gwen. She dropped her jaw to the table, got up and walked out, didn't say a word. And then Todd fucking argued with him for
an hour
about whether or not he should let them try to make him straight. Kudos to this dude, because he didn't go for it even one fucking iota.
No, he said, fuck this.
Very misguided in believing he could change them. But once he realized he could not, he was like, well, you're not going to fucking change me. And by the way, those 4 other guys you said you changed, no, you didn't. Yeah. So high five to him in that moment. But yeah, so I just think it's important to hit on the fact, we only have a few minutes left, but to hit on the fact that she had somebody whose whole job was to emotionally abuse people till they did what she wanted them to do.
Yep.
That's insane.
Yeah, he was a henchman in that sense. So yeah, so there's a lot, but we hit on what we could. But
I will say this, just one last thing. All of the teenagers who got out talk about being suicidal. One of the women, she's a woman now, she's a teenager at the time, she had a athletic scholarship, or she had several, and she chose a shitty one just to be close to the church. And then the church needed her to be the best athlete that ever walked the earth, but also to not eat. So she fucking burnt out.
Mm-hmm.
We have somebody talking about like there's holes in her fucking kidneys because she starved herself so much.
Yep.
We have people believing that the reason that they gained weight after they left the church was because they were cursed, and not because that's just what happens when you start eating again. And I just feel like it's important to hit on these things, because this church doesn't work anywhere that doesn't have the attitudes about weight that we have. It just doesn't.
Yeah. There's also the one lady who was pregnant and was divorcing her husband, got out of the church, and they said that she was cursed, and then she miscarried. And she had to carry the guilt of thinking that she was cursed, which is fucked. That's just fucked.
When we hear that so much, right? And there's you'll be cursed. You'll never find happiness again. You'll whatever. These high control religions, aka cults, it's not enough to threaten you with hell, right? I have a problem with a lot of churches that I don't think are cults. They threaten you with hell. That's fucked up. You shouldn't do it. But these organizations are like, immediately you will be miserable. And 9 times out of 10, the reason that you are miserable is because of what they are fucking doing to you.
Yep.
Not because you're actually not living your truth, but because they are harassing you, they are cutting you off from your family, etc. That was another thing, I think it was Natasha that said she was being followed.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would make me fucking miserable too if my ex wanted to accuse me of molesting my child and fucking sue me into oblivion and have people follow me. That would make me pretty fucking miserable. It doesn't mean that I should be a member of that church. That's not what it means.
Yep. Agreed. So yeah, it was fucked up on a million levels, but okay. All right. So let's talk a bit about, first of all, I don't have a lot to say about this because I had never heard of this until I proposed this to you.
Me either. This will be a fun one. We're both going in like
So this is the cult at the end of the world. The reason this kind of struck my fancy was this started as like a yoga practice, and then they ended up becoming militant and like make their own nerve gas and like sure. So yeah, neither of us have heard of this, which if I can find a cult you haven't heard of, I feel like that's a success for me. Like I won that round. So yeah, this I believe is on YouTube that you can watch. So I don't think you have to like have a streaming service to watch it. So yeah, that will be on June. Sorry, I'm gonna pull up my calendar and I didn't have it ready. June 4th. So June 4th, we'll have that live. And yeah, Renee, final thoughts before we close it out for the evening.
Diet culture is a fucking disease. Don't listen to it, even if it doesn't come from a lady with weird hair running a fucking Southern church. Just don't listen to it.
Yeah. If they're not talking about balanced diet, they're fucking, if they're not genuinely talking about balanced diet, it's fucking bullshit.
If someone's giving you nutritional advice and it is about how much you weigh and not how you feel physically, they are full of shit and they're dangerous. And you should listen to that podcast I mentioned, Maintenance Phase, so you can start to become deprogrammed.
Yeah, for real. So anyway, Renee, as always, thanks for doing this with me. And we always have a blast doing it. At least I do. So
me too.
Yeah.
All right, can I like represent some local shit right now real quick though?
Yes, please do.
Okay. So these earrings are by my wonderful friend. Her brand is called Clay62, and she makes lots of cool earrings. This shirt is from a store called Very Very, and it's very cool. And my new tattoo that just got finished is from a local tattoo shop here in Yucca Valley. So
very colorful.
We got cool shit.
Yeah, that's a very nice, colorful tattoo. I saw images of that on Instagram. So if you're not following Renee on Instagram, please do Artaposty.
Artapostasy, like apostasy, but with art in it.
Artapostasy. So please do that. And yeah, as you can see, my moniker is Scotch Flavorism on Instagram. So yeah, folks, do take care of yourselves. Renee, thanks again. And we will see you all soon in a month. Cheers.